Today, we're diving into a plan that's making waves all around the world, the UK Rwanda Asylum Partnership. Now, this isn't just a political headline. It's a policy that's forcing us to ask some really big questions about human rights, international law, and, well, what it even means to be a wealthy nation with responsibilities. So, what is this deal and why is it causing such a huge debate? Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Why would you send asylum seekers 4,000 miles away? I mean, we're talking about the United Kingdom here, a country that was literally instrumental in creating the 1951 Refugee Convention. So why this dramatic shift? To really get it, we've got to break down what this deal actually is. Okay, so its official title is the Migration and Economic Development Partnership. It was signed back in April 2022, and the idea behind it is, on the surface, pretty simple. The UK can take certain asylum seekers, specifically those arriving through what the government calls illegal routes, and fly them to Rwanda. And here's the kicker. Their claims get processed in Rwanda. If they're successful, they're resettled there, not in the UK. Right, so why create a policy that was bound to be so controversial? Well, to understand the UK government's side of this, you have to look at the pressure they were under. And that story really starts with a couple of key numbers. First off, just look at the raw numbers. In the year ending in June 2023, the UK got almost 79,000 asylum applications. That is a huge number. And it's not happening in a vacuum, right? This is driven by global crises in places like Afghanistan and Syria. And it was putting this incredible strain on the UK's ability to even process all these claims. And that surge, it led to a massive, massive backlog. By the middle of 2023, you had 175,000 people just stuck in legal limbo, waiting, sometimes for years, just to find out what their future holds. And this wasn't just a spreadsheet problem. It was a huge political and, of course, a humanitarian crisis. So, facing all this pressure, the UK government comes forward with the Rwanda plan and pitches it as a bold, if radical, solution. Officially, they said it would do three main things: stop the dangerous crossings in the English Channel, completely break the business model of people smugglers, and, of course, ease the strain on their own asylum system. But the reaction was immediate, and it was fierce. We're talking human rights groups, legal experts, even the United Nations. They all raised some very serious alarms right from the get-go. And this wasn't just low-level chatter. This came from the very top. The UN's own High Commissioner for Refugees came out and said this plan was a breach of the Refugee Convention. And let's be clear, that's not just some obscure treaty, it's the absolute bedrock of international refugee protection. And the criticism just kept coming. The Council of Europe's Human Rights Commissioner took it even a step further. They warned that this policy raised major concerns, not just for the people seeking asylum, but for the rule of law inside the UK itself. That's a pretty heavy charge. It wasn't just international bodies either. Voices from within Rwanda started speaking up. A prominent opposition politician, Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza, basically said, hold on a second. She argued that with its own political and economic challenges, Rwanda just couldn't offer a real solution for these people. So if you boil all this criticism down, it really comes back to one core principle. It's called non-refoulement. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a fundamental rule in international law. You can't send a refugee to a place where they could be in danger. And critics say this plan does exactly that. They point to concerns over Rwanda's human rights record, its justice system, and they're worried this could set a really dangerous precedent, one that could start to unravel the whole global system for protecting refugees. And that really brings us to the bigger picture here. Because this deal, it isn't just about the UK and Rwanda. It forces us to ask a much bigger question. Is this just a one-off? Or are we seeing the beginning of a whole new global trend in how countries manage migration? So you can really see two completely different futures branching off from this one policy. On the one hand, you have the supporters who see a brand new model for managing asylum, one that stops illegal crossings and crushes smuggling networks. But on the other hand, you have the critics, and they see a pretty bleak future where wealthy nations can just pay to make their legal and moral obligations someone else's problem, completely undermining this idea of shared responsibility. And hey, this is not just a theoretical debate. We're already seeing other countries like Denmark looking into similar kinds of deals. If this model really takes off, it could completely change how international cooperation on asylum works, basically shifting the burden away from wealthier nations and onto countries in the global south. It would challenge the very idea of what it means to seek refuge. Which leaves us with one last really big question. Is this the future of global migration policy? A world where asylum becomes a commodity? Something that can be bought and sold, outsourcing responsibility from the global north to the global south? It's a heavy question, and honestly, the fate of this UK-Rwanda deal could end up being the answer for decades to come.